Do you think that there is a different way of approaching a game review when you're on television versus in a magazine or on a website?
Yeah, there definitely is. You only have so much time to say what your thoughts are on TV because the segments are so short. In magazine writing or website writing, I would tend to write reviews that were around 2,000 words long. So talking about like essays, and you bring in lots of comparisons with other games. Also with TV, there is the whole thing about B-roll, where we're talking about something and we have to be able to show it as well. So we need to show that part in the game that we're talking about. And if we talk about another game that it kind of reminds us of, we need to also have a visual of that in case someone who's watching is not familiar. They can see like, oh, this is how they visually compare at least. On a website, you can just hyperlink that to other articles that you may have written on that other game. And so a lot of the references have to be a lot tighter on TV, and you just have to be a lot snappier. When I write stuff for blog or magazine reasons, I usually go through several drafts, and when I'm doing a review on the show, we just talk.
Right. So, break down, like, when you go in, you're in work mode, you're playing a game, what's different about when you're approaching a game for a review versus when you're playing it just for fun?
A lot, actually. Usually when I'm doing a review, I have a notepad of some sort nearby, so I can write down any sort of character names, any sort of weird intricacies with the game that I found to be a little odd, something that I might want to bring up later, or like a glitch that I might try to replicate later on, or just to try redoing different things. Because in a way, you're not just playing the game for the experience of it, but you're playing it to see that it actually works. And on the iOS platform, which is the platform that I do all the reviews for the show on, there are a lot of issues where if there's too many apps that are open in the background, some of them might be eating memory or eating battery power, and that can conflict and cause sorts of problems with the game that's being played. So there are a lot of things to keep in mind like that.
Okay, so you cover the iOS platform. How do you think iOS has evolved over the while that apps have been available? Like, what's different about a game coming out today versus maybe, I don't know, a few years ago?
That's a great question. Definitely the scope and the depth of these games are getting bigger. That's not for all games. A lot of iOS games are very quick pick up and play, but we've seen a lot of games where you can see that there really is an audience for a much more in-depth experience on a portable device. So we've seen games like Waking Mars that came out this year, which is an absolutely beautiful exploration game where you're walking around Mars and you're sort of terraforming it and you're discovering other species that live beneath the Martian surface, and that's just a really cool experience. There's a game called Flight of the Fireflies where it's not like one of these quick reflex games. It's just all about the experience of flying around the night sky as a group of fireflies and getting more fireflies to join in, and each one that you get adds a different instrument to the track that's playing in the background, and it's a really zen experience. We've had a game like Sword and Sorcery EP that came out last year and actually cleaned up at the Canadian Video Game Awards last night. That really showed that people were looking for not only something different on a handheld device, but something different in general as far as games are concerned, because we see a lot of the same types of games repeatedly, and you can almost forecast which games are going to be the biggest games of the year just based on who's making them, the marketing money behind it, and what type of game it is. So it's nice when the iOS platform has really freed up developers to take chances with awesome ideas that big publishers would never really take a chance on consoles.
Do you think that the iDevices are really being taken advantage of fully? That people have given up the paradigm of, I guess, pre-touch interfaces?
Well, I think the touch interface is obviously a huge part of the experience of playing an iOS game. And in a lot of games, that touch can actually be an emotional thing. Sometimes when they try to emulate a game that you would have like a D-pad controller or an NES-style control, it doesn't really work too well, and you've got to make sure that you've placed the buttons in the right place, especially on something like the iPad where your hands are really far apart and the device is really skinny. It's awkward. But when they use the controls to the advantage, like when it's just like drag controls or tap controls or a combination of that and tilt, I find that it really works. But in terms of what the device is capable of, each time there's a new iPad or an iPhone, they add all these crazy advances in processing power to the device. So I think we're just going to be seeing a lot of like really cool high-end stuff happening from the developers that can afford to do so, and then we'll see smaller devs possibly making the games that we still see them making, but also taking chances and doing cooler things. What I would personally like to see is some sort of integration between the tablet, the iPad, and consoles. And I know it can happen because for the Real Steel Blu-ray, there's this feature called Second Screen, where you put the Blu-ray in your PlayStation 3 and it's beaming over your Wi-Fi network to your iPad information that's just cues, and it syncs up with an app that you download from the App Store, and the two work together. So it's kind of like watching special features while you're watching the movie, and you can control the movie from your iPad, and it's crazy because you wouldn't think that an iPad could talk to a PS3, but yet it does, and it works really well. So what I would love to see is these big publishers for Nintendo, Sony, and Microsoft take the chance and use that as a second screen. And I think maybe Nintendo will be less inclined to do so since they're working on the Wii U, which is basically that.
Right.
But
Good point.
I think like Sony and Microsoft could easily jump on board and
Yeah.
beat them to it if they wanted to.
Do you think that it hurts? Because on that note, Microsoft and Sony both have products that, at least in theory, compete with the iPhone. This might be a weird answer, but do you think that that essentially prevents them from really taking advantage of all the devices their users have?
You know, what's weird is I see that there's a lot of pride these companies have, and they don't want to say, oh, this other company is doing something right. But the truth of the matter is people who are working on these games, they are fans of everything. And they, of course, love what they do, and they want their games and products to do well. But there's no denying that if people were to let down some of their guard and to be a little more willing to work with one another, that amazing things can happen. That said, competition is good for the industry, and we see that with the quality of games that are coming out, and people just trying to one-up each other all the time makes it better for us as fans of games.